Hi Not Board Gamers, and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now in today's video, I'm going to be giving my review on this game right here, which is of course Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era from Chip Theory Games. Now of course this came to GameFound about 18 months, 2 years ago, etc. And I was given an early copy by Chip Theory Games along with some other content creators a couple of months ago. I think it's due to be on boats anytime in the next few weeks and hopefully get delivered to backers by the end of the year. Certainly I know they're hoping for November. We'll see what happens there. But as I say, I've had this for a couple of months now, and let me tell you, I have played the heck out of this game. I must have 50 to 60 hours invested in this game so far. And I played it true solo, I played it solo with 2 characters, I played it at 2-player, I played it at 3-player. I haven't played it at 4-player, but I played it at all those other player counts. And I'm going to say off the bat that this game is now my favourite game of all time. Now that's very easy for me to say. Of course it is. It's very easy for me to say. I'm purely subjective based on my own kind of preferences in terms of my game likes. Of course, you may think I'm swayed by the fact that Chip Theory sent me through an early copy, and you know, obviously I'm not. It's a very bold statement to make, to say that Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era is my favourite game of all time. But why is that the case? Well, let's talk about some of my favourite games. So my list has been pretty static in the top 3 since almost, the very first year or so that I got into board gaming. We're talking number 3 is probably Nemesis, number 2 would be Too Many Bones, and number 1 would be Kingdom Death Monster. Now I always say that Kingdom Death Monster stands almost outside of all the other games. It's almost a boutique experience on its own. But I don't think I've played any game quite as much and enjoyed every single session quite as much as I have Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era. So it's with a lot of thought on my part, and I know a lot of reviewers have had their videos out and gameplay videos out for quite a while now, but it's taken me a lot to actually really get into the meat and the potatoes of the game, understand where it fits within what I look for in a game. And despite a few minor missteps, this really absolutely hits the nail on the head all the way through for me. So let's get into some of the reasons why that's the case. Now, this video is not going to be, I'm not going to show you any gameplay videos because there are a ton of gameplay videos out there. You can look at Ricky Royal's videos, Paul Grogan's videos, Kanji Studios videos. Myself and Mike Dennis on his channel, Ready Steady Play, are in the middle of filming a full campaign using the Valenwood expansion, which I have here, which will be out on Ready Steady Play very shortly. Part 1 will be out very, very shortly. We're having an absolute blast. That's another full campaign that you will see from beginning to end over a series of 3 videos. So I'm not going to discuss the gameplay in any great depth. What I really want to talk about is what makes this game very, very special for me. So, as you can see, I got the base game and I got the Valenwood expansion, and it came in a huge, huge, huge box, and it's all this stuff that's on the table and some more that's in down there in the boxes as well that you can't really see. So it's loads and loads of stuff here, and when you provide this much content for a game and this many components for a game, then you better make sure it's a bloody high quality. And of course, it's Chip Theory Games game, and of course that means that we have neoprene mats. It means that we have poker chip style tokens. It means that we have these heat printed dice. It means that we have their wonderful cards, which have got that great smell. I love that smell, etc. We've got bags to pull chips from. We've got a number of gazettes, which are ring bound, and rule books, which are ring bound. We have a large number of characters with some fantastic artwork on there as well. So the production quality is absolutely off the charts for this. And that is obviously only part of a gaming experience, but when you get a game that absolutely pops on the table, it makes that experience feel a hell of a lot better. When we look at things like the player trays, they come in so the player trays are neoprene. They come in these plastic trays, which you get to then put a lid on top and therefore keep your characters and your characters and their stats in between sessions. Here we can see one of our characters here from mine and Mike's current session there. So yeah, we have the wonderful artwork, we have everything that makes sense on the player trays. So we do have this wonderful, wonderful production quality, which goes all the way through. Everything has been, you know, one of the reasons I should imagine it's taken quite a while is to make sure that everything absolutely pops and sings, and it does. With that, of course, when you start talking about doing all these great components, you know, all the chips and the cards and the wonderful books and the neoprene, etc., there comes a cost element. Now, as well as obviously receiving this early from Chip Theory Games, I was also a backer of this, so I went all in on this as well with my own money. So I went all in on this as well. But there is a hefty cost for this as well. So when you are considering the game itself, yes, you're going to get some fantastic looking components, some wonderful rule books, all the spiral-bound stuff, but it's all going to come at a fairly premium price as well. Now, you can just get the base game on its own. It's still relatively expensive, but you can just get the base game on its own and have just untold adventures, basically. But once you start adding the expansions like the Valenwood, some of the other expansions, other things like the metal swords where you used to kind of track your XP, etc. Where you look at the portfolios that you can have your characters, all that will start adding cost. And I think once you're kind of throwing everything in there, you're looking at over £400 for a game. Now, a lot of that is obviously, it wears its heart on its sleeve. This is not a game of cardboard and dice. This is a game of neoprene and fancy, you know, fancy cards. It's a game of stunning artwork. It's a game of bags. It's a game of loads and loads of dice. It's a game of fantastic rule books, but all that comes at an absolute cost. And that is one of the reasons why, despite the fantastic production quality, you know, it may well not be for you. And of course, within that cost as well as the IP license fee that I'm sure they would have had to pay to Bethesda and ZeniMax for the use of the Elder Scrolls name. So do be mindful that you will get a fantastic looking game, but you will pay for that experience. Now, if that is not too much of an issue for you, I know they did stretch pay, and you could stretch that out for that, then you're in for a surprise because, you know, future you, the one that gets the game in November, is going to really thank past you that backed it and used stretch pay to pay for this off in installments. But the game absolutely sings and looks totally fantastic on the table. So, components-wise, really top of the charts. Better than Too Many Bones, I would say. The fact that you're obviously using artwork that's been sanctioned as well by ZeniMax and Bethesda in terms of really capturing the feel of the world of the Elder Scrolls. So components-wise, I think it's better, and a lot of it has been designed in such a way that it makes more sense. I've obviously learnt from some of the complexities of a game like Too Many Bones and made everything kind of a lot more accessible for people as you're kind of working through how to play the game. So yeah, production quality off the charts, but that comes with a cost for the game. The next thing I want to discuss is the sheer variety in the game. So I say I played 50, 60 odd hours in this game. I played a number of characters through a number of campaigns. And when we start talking about the amount of characters, so look at all these different kind of species cards that we've got here, okay? We got loads, and there's some over here as well. There's some with the characters. There's absolutely loads and loads of species that you can choose from. So is it a Khajiit, a Redguard, an Imperial, a Dark Elf, a Breton, an Argonian, an Orc, a Wood Elf? You can absolutely choose, and you can choose either side if you want male or female on there, or non-gender specific on there, then you can choose absolutely either side for that. As well as the species you can choose, you can also choose their class as well, and there's a huge number of classes here. Some of these may be from Valenwood, so we've got Scout, we've got Sorcerer, we've got Spellsword, we've got Rogue, Templar, Warden, Pilgrim, Nightblade, Necromancer, Healer, all the Burglar, all of these wonderful classes. So the ability to kind of have a look at what you want and build a character accordingly is really, really good. And it doesn't just stop there, because when you go into your characters and you start building them out, you get to choose all the various traits that you can choose as well, all the various skills that you've got. And again, there's a large number of skills you can choose from. So as you start achieving new skills and building those new skills up, then you can really tailor your character to how you want that character to be. It is the closest thing to a Dungeons and Dragons style RPG in terms of character build that I've seen, I think, in any game. The ability to really just adapt. Don't get too attached to these characters though, because there's at least one event that happens. I think it's called Wabberjack attack, which means that whatever species that you've got, if you happen to come on Wabberjack attack and you have to do it, then what it's going to do is say, hey, you know what? Here's what's going to happen. That species that you got, you're going to put that away, and you're going to choose a random species. So things can come to upset the apple cart, and this wonderfully crafted character is suddenly that you had as a Khajiit may now be an Argonian who does something completely different. Of course, each of the species comes with their own kind of unique abilities and their own stats, etc., which helps you kind of understand the difference in how they play, and how you build out their skill sets is really important. And therefore, when I'm playing with other people or with two characters, building the right skill sets for the characters that we're playing with is fantastic, because you get that wonderful dynamic, that interplay between them. The upgrading system works off the trays, and you can buy skills and then train your skills and get more dice for that skills as a way to untrain skills as well. So if you're deciding that, I don't know, you want more two-handed combat dice, then what you can do is potentially, I don't know, untrain some of your magic, so it gives you more space on there. And that gives you this real sense of adaptability as well, because you may try something with a character, it doesn't quite work. You think, right, I want to replace that with something else if I have the time, and try and build those skill points. So we've got the characters, which is just absolutely monumental in terms of how much variability you've got in there. But also what we got is all of the gazettes for each of the areas where you're going to fight, where you're going to explore. So here I have Valenwood, which is an expansion, High Rock, Skyrim, Cyrodiil, Morrowind, and Black Marsh. And each of these will offer you different adventures as well. You see, in the game, you're going to fight, or you're going to do an adventure on behalf of a guild, and there are a number of different guilds as well. So you choose a guild, you choose a location, and that's from one of these location maps here. Here we go. There you go, you can see them, and they're double-sided as well. Choose a guild, you choose a location, you go to the relevant area of the relevant gazette for that location, and you start the quest for that particular guild. And that will be your first quest, which will take, your first 12 days or so that you will do. Then, for your second quest, you can carry on in the same place, or you can choose a completely different quest, go for a different guild, different quest in another area. So maybe you go from Black Marsh to Morrowind, or maybe you go from Cyrodiil to Skyrim. Completely up to you, wherever you choose for your second one though. So each adventure is 3 quests. Wherever you go for your second quest is where your third quest is going to take place, so do be mindful of that. But because of how that works, because it works on a different guild basis, it means that, you could literally just play the game using Black Marsh and have, I don't know how many guilds there are, 12 guilds, something like that, 12 different adventures in there basically, but you're not going to. You're going to swap and change these guilds. So not only do we have the players, not only do we have the skills and the abilities and the classes, etc., not only do we have the different areas that you can go with the gazettes, you've also got the different guilds that you can fight for. All this adds up to a large element of variability and replayability. Of course, it comes down to the core gameplay. You've got to like the core gameplay, because the core gameplay doesn't necessarily change, but the amount of variability can. So, if you like variability and replayability, and you've got all the gazettes, basically, then what you're going to have is the ability to play numerous campaigns or numerous games using numerous different character builds, going different quests, doing different things, which is really, really kind of really just changes things up. You're going to have almost a sandboxy type adventure. It's not too sandboxy, but almost a sandboxy type adventure. Now, on the back end of that, as I say, wherever you go for your second quest is where your third quest is going to be. And your third quest eventually will always culminate in kind of the big boss fight, if you like, what you've been building towards. Now, because there are 1, 2, 3, right? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because we've got 6 here, 6 or 7 gazettes here. That means there are only 6 or 7 kind of big boss fights in the base game. So your boss fights are going to, if you play it a lot, you're going to have some of the same boss fights, but fear not, because what they do is, depending on how you got to that boss fight through your quest, you'll be collecting keywords, and those keywords will have an effect on that end game fight. So you do have some variability there, and I should imagine that the plan will be, given the success of the game, is to release more adaptability and more variability on those boss fights as well. Look, it's a small thing, but do be mindful that you've got 6 or 7 boss fights that you may repeat at the end of your campaigns. But bear in mind, a campaign is going to be at the end of 36 days of play. and each of those quest sessions is probably going to take you quite a few hours. So a full campaign, they say around about 12 hours. In reality, it's stretching a little bit longer than that for us. But a full campaign, they say around about 12 hours. So you say 12 hours. So, 12 hours to get to a boss fight, you're going to have to do that 6 times. What's that? 12 sixes is 72. So that's 72 hours, 6 or 7 times, either 72 or 79 hours to go through all of the boss fights and then do it again. Chances are you're probably not going to do that. But do be mindful, wherever you do your second quest is where your final quest is going to be. But the sheer number, the sheer amount of variability and playability, that's without even getting into what happens on a daily basis, where you go on the boards, etc., is just utterly astounding. And I think that if you're looking for a game, yes, go back to what I said, that's expensive, but gives you loads and loads of replayability and variability and reason to go back and play it, then, this amount of variability that you got is probably going to be a key factor for you. So that's kind of 2 of the major things there. Now, let's talk about the gameplay itself. So, when it comes to the gameplay, if you play Too Many Bones, you understand some of the DNA in here. It's taken that Too Many Bones system, which if you know Too Many Bones, you've got this small grid map and your combat is going to happen on there. And each day you're going to progress and you're going to get another event card in Too Many Bones, and then you're probably going to have a battle or an upgrade, etc. at the end of that day. Well, this has taken that and it's expanded on it. It's more than Too Many Bones 2.0 because it's not a replication. You see, rather than kind of the small quest mat that you get, or the small battle map that you get in Too Many Bones, you're going to get this as kind of the main map that you're going to be doing parts of the adventure on. Now, there are different tiles and different things that will happen. You will explore dungeons, which will expand this off in kind of procedural fashion. Delves, which will expand it off in a procedural fashion, or dungeons, which will give you a larger kind of preset map on there. But as you can see, this is already kind of bigger and applies more tactical space than what you would get on the Too Many Bones map. That means that the combat has to change accordingly, and what you do on that has to change accordingly. There has to be more to it than just moving a couple of spaces and rolling a few dice, and that's exactly what they've done here with the Elder Scrolls. These builds that you have of your characters are absolutely key and instrumental into kind of what happens on this mat and how successful you are. You see, throughout your campaign, you're going to rack up experience points. And whenever you come and do any kind of combat or any kind of encounter that forces some combat, you're then going to work out your the baddie points that you have, or your baddie queue, should I say, or your enemy queue. And to do that, you're going to take the total number of experience points you got and multiply it by the number of players, and then that is going to give you what baddies are out there. And baddies come in 1s, 5s, 10s and 20s. So you're going to use the multiples of those to achieve the number that you get to. Say you've got to 36, it'll be 120, 110, 1.5 and 1.1 that you would put out on the map, and it tells you where to put it. So already you can see these coming out onto the map and in a slightly different way. And they all react very, very differently as well. So that's another thing that you've got to be mindful of as well, is just the fact that you're going to have to understand some of the keywords on there, on each of the baddies and what they do. Now, there's a couple of really good, I've left them in the box, there's a couple of really good reference sheets that actually go through those keywords. So once you understand how they work, then the reference to those keywords makes perfect sense. But because you've got this massive wealth now of baddies on there, and we're not just talking like it wasn't Too Many Bones, that there might be some of the same 1-point baddies, etc. You're going to have a wealth of them on there, which means that your tactical and your strategic decisions for the battle are going to be very, very different than what they were in Too Many Bones, in a more expanded and in-depth way. Certainly on the kind of static battle map that you've got, you probably work out some kind of patterns that your characters can do based on their skills and their abilities. But as we get into delves, which you've got these procedural dungeons, and as we get into dungeons as well, which is the larger preset maps, you've got to start thinking in more dimensions, as something you do here may get affected by something a room away, etc. So suddenly the ability to kind of work your skills in there becomes more in depth. So depth-wise, it actually offers more, I think, than Too Many Bones in terms of depth of what's happening on the mat itself. Obviously, in Too Many Bones, one of the key things is you get to understand that individual character's build, so you'll know what pick it does, or you know what duster does, and you know which dice generally work for you best on this. But because you're kind of gradually building a character that has quite a few variables on it in here, the aim is to try and make something that will work in certain situations and be okay in other situations, and know that you're going to rely on the strength of other characters to do that. So you do get this kind of, this level of complexity that goes back to your build. There's quite a few encounters we've had where we got through them by the skin of our teeth, and that was purely based on decisions that we made maybe 3 or 4, or maybe even in a previous quest in the game, in an earlier build of the character, which really came to fruition, and those moments are absolutely golden. There's other parts, other battles that have happened where you think, oh, if I would have just made that choice 3 hours ago and taken this skill instead of that skill, I'd be in a fantastic position here. But the game always seems to allow you to work out, how to do something. There are obviously conditions, etc. You can put onto yourself and onto the bad guys as well, which allows you to then play around with what you've got, and that interplay between the two characters is really, really good. So, gameplay-wise, I think it's absolutely fantastic in terms of the core combat mechanism. When it comes to kind of the stuff in between, which is moving around on these maps, that's a little bit of a sandboxy thing. You will always have a set number of days that you can do things on, and your aim will to be try and build up your character, visit the various places on here in the right kind of way to try and get what you need to build up your character so you're ready for the fight at the end of the quest. And they have various things. They have towns on there. They have peaceful encounters. They also have combat encounters, and they have unstables as well. And wherever you go, you're going to trigger something on there. Then you're going to do what it is, be that an encounter card, or maybe you go to the shop, etc. Go to the town and do things in the town, or maybe you have a combat encounter on the back of there. And all that will then lead you to one place where you need to be at the end of your generally 12 days on each quest, which will then trigger the end of quest adventure. Sorry, the end of the end of quest encounter, which is generally going to be a big battle of some sorts. So you do get this element in between. You can choose. You can decide to be as aggressive or unaggressive, or as kind of bullish as you want, basically. But know that at the end of it, if you haven't prepped enough, that end fight is going to be really, really difficult for you. So you need to make sure that you can kind of do that. Now, with all of that, you've got all these interlocking mechanisms. You've got the upgrading of your characters, your various class abilities and skills, etc. You've got travelling around the towns. You've got the peaceful encounters. You've also got, not the towns, the maps. You've got the peaceful encounters. You've got your standard combat encounters. You have your delves. You have your dungeons. You have your end of quest fights, and you have your end of adventure fight as well. Each one might throw a few slightly different game-breaking rules in there for you, so you've got to be aware of that. And I know certainly, we've been caught short on a couple of occasions where we've had to restart a particular fight because we missed a key part in the rules, in the rules for that particular fight, or the end of adventure fight, etc. So do be aware that you're taking into account that sometimes, because of all this complexity and using kind of common components to create something that feels unique, it may well throw some game-changing or game-bending rules at you, and you've got to be aware and potentially make note of them, that actually, yes, it's, I don't fight this the way that I normally fight it. I don't do this bit the way that I normally do. I would have to do X, Y, and Z. They should be a little bit bolder in the rule books, I think, a little bit more stand out in the rule books, but, you're going to make a few errors. Don't worry too much about it, but just make sure that you try and do all that. So all that ties up into this really, really satisfying gameplay experience for me. I get the RPG element, I get the narrative element, because it's got a lot stronger narrative than Too Many Bones, which is essentially a series of kind of disconnected encounters until you get to the boss fight, etc. This works in a more narrative way. You're doing something specific on that map, each quest, and you're following the story as you go through that. It's not, it is actually connected from quest to quest for the entire adventure as well, so it does make sense throughout it. It's not a hugely strongly narrative game by any stretch of the imagination. It's not on rails. You are free to do many of your own things. But yeah, for me, I'd say it hits that thing in terms of building my character, understanding the narrative, knowing what I'm trying to build and trying to go towards. That can add a level of complexity for people. So if that feels like a lot for you to get to grips with, then maybe, your kind of one-shotting experiences, or a game that provides you with a one-shotting experience, might be better suited for you. So that's kind of the gameplay element. I think it's fantastic. It really does kind of hit the nail for me, and that's one of the reasons why it is my current #1 game of all time. So let's talk about the rules now then. So is it a more complex game than Too Many Bones? I don't think it is, despite the fact that it's got more mechanisms that have to mesh together. I actually think it plays a little bit more intuitively than Too Many Bones. And what is the reason for that? Well, I think first of all, it comes down to the characters themselves. As I say, you're kind of fashioning your characters at the beginning of the game and then adapting their skills as you go through the game. But you're learning them as you go through. So what you've not got is like this plethora or wealth of rules that you have to kind of understand for your character. It's innate abilities, like you're doing Too Many Bones, it's innate abilities, what each dice does, what you have to do to get the next one, etc. No, it's actually easier to manage your characters here. Now, there are many people out there, like myself, who play Too Many Bones like way too many times to count now. So we kind of know all the nuances of each character. I still make mistakes in Too Many Bones. I must have played that game 100 times. I still make mistakes in Too Many Bones if I'm playing a character that's either new to me or I haven't played for a while, etc. So I still make mistakes. I find this more of an easier game to grok in terms of the character builds and what they do and what is expected of my character, because it's an open book, or they are an open book. You know, I can choose to go heavy on magic, or I can choose to go combat heavy, or maybe I want to be an acrobat, or maybe I want to be a legerdemain. It doesn't matter. I can choose that, and I can learn about that as I go along. I can get to upgrade my dice as I go along and choose how strong they want to be. It's a little bit more... While there is obviously options in Too Many Bones, it's a little bit more on rails in terms of what dice you can have. Here, you're free to build your character whatever you want. If you want to build a two-handed acrobat, then you build a two-handed acrobat, basically. Yeah, two-handed weapon acrobat. So if you want to be a big fighter who can fly around the room, then you can absolutely free to do that. If you want to build somebody that purely does magic, etc., then do that on here. You can mix and match to your heart's content. So in terms of character build, once you understand the basics, I find it actually easier to understand my characters than I do in Too Many Bones. When it comes to the actual gameplay itself, we do have this rather wonderful rule book. Now, I'm going to scare you here and say that this rule book is 94 pages long. And that sounds like a lot, but you've got so many examples in this rule book, and it literally takes you through every step of the game. I can't think of almost no occasions where I've had to go back to chip theory and ask for clarifications on the rules, because it's generally been in here. I know people like Paul Grogan and Ricky Royal and Michael Kelly from One Stop Coat Shop and myself have all kind of gone back to chip theory and just added a few kind of suggestions about the rule book. But in essence, I think the rule book is absolutely excellent. Your copy of the rule book will come with an index. My copy didn't, because it was a pre-production copy. So your copy of the rule book will come with an index. But even without an index, I was able to find that. What you can do is actually go through the tutorial, the jailbreak tutorial as well. So there is a separate tutorial guide and a jailbreak scenario, which eases you into the game, gives you some of the mechanisms there. It does say that you can do that every single game, every single campaign that you start, but you may, mileage may vary. You may decide to do it or not do it. So it can ease you into the game. So I find it overall, and maybe it's because I've got a lot of experience in playing Too Many Bones, that I didn't find it too difficult to grok the rules on here. Now, if you've never played Too Many Bones before in any iteration, and you're coming into this and you see a 94-page rule book, that could be a little bit daunting, but do take the time. I read through the rule book first before I went into the demo. Went into my game, my very first game. I read the rule book first. It took some time, but it actually paid dividends. And then I just had it open as I played my first game and just got to grips with it, etc. And then moved on from there. And now we find that there are very few occasions where we're having to refer to the rule book, basically. There are some edge cases, of course, like there is in everything, because you've got so many moving parts. But the rule book, I find, is pretty bloody comprehensive. Again, other people's opinions may vary on that. Bear in mind that each gazette that you've got, each town that you visit will have a separate story. Each town that you visit will have a kind of separate mechanisms in there. Each map for each gazette will have something that happens different on the board. So always these ways of kind of constantly rule bending and rule changing that you have to be aware of. So coming back to the question, is it a difficult game to learn? It's It's not the easiest game to learn, but I don't think it's necessarily a difficult game to learn. If you learn by playing it more or less okay in the first time, understanding where you've made some mistakes, then going back, play your next game, getting it even better, and by kind of 3 or 4 games in, you've probably got 99.99% of the rules down. So I think there's a lot going on. The rulebook explains it very well, and allowed me to get to grips with it very quickly, but I do think some of that comes from the fact that I had played Too Many Bones a considerable number of times, and therefore, although it's not Too Many Bones 2.0, it's a further iteration of Too Many Bones, if you like. It's the next generation, shares some of the DNA, but it's very much its own game. Then yeah, just be aware that you're going to have to invest some time in reading the rules, and you're probably going to play some of it wrong. Do not worry about that in the slightest. You know, it's very, very easy to get rules wrong in any game, more so when there's lots of moving parts. But I think what they've done is try to explain it in the best way possible. If you're feeling daunted by the whole thing, play through the tutorial, play through the jailbreak tutorial. That will guide you through it, and then you can move on from there. So then we come down to player count and player numbers. So as I say, I've played it true solo. I've played it solo with 2 characters. I've played 2-player, and I've played 3-player as well. But my channel is a solo channel. So let's just park the kind of 2 and 3-player ones over there and talk about the difference between true solo and playing it with 2 characters. Because it has the adaptive XP kind of leveling up, if you like. So in terms of your experience, that will then dictate how the kind of value of the baddies that come out, or the enemies that come out onto the map. Then of course you can play it true solo. But true solo, for me, whilst I enjoyed the experience, I'm not getting the optimal amount out of it. And the reason being is I get most when I'm bouncing my skills off another character's skills. Now, I'm pretty much the same with Too Many Bones. I know Too Many Bones has got true solo. I played it true solo. I, by choice, would not really play Too Many Bones true solo. And I'm going to say that's exactly the same for the Elder Scrolls. As much as I thought true solo absolutely works, and if that's your bag, then you're going to have a great time playing true solo. I get more out of it by having 2 characters. I don't think I'd want to build 3 characters. That would just be too much to handle. But by having 2 characters, I can then start building one way, building one another to complement it, bouncing those skills off of each other when we get into combat, etc., and really making this very strong partnership where I'm in control of both of them. Now that does come at a cost, of course it does, and that comes at the cost of the fact that the games are going to take longer because I'm playing 2 characters, and I have 2 characters and all their associated skills and everything that you need to build up from that to keep on top of it and fully understand. Now, I'm okay with that, but again, if that's not your thing, then that can have a serious impact on just how much kind of total enjoyment you're going to get out of the game. If you really enjoy true solo, you know, it's the only way you want to play games, then, you know, it is totally doable true solo. You think you're missing out on a key part of the experience, which is this ability to, as I say, pair up and understand how each character works with another character. For me, I'm okay with running 2 characters. I'm okay with that build. I'm okay with managing a couple of characters because I get more joy out of that. Because I get more joy out of kind of bouncing them off each other. I get more joy out of sending one way, sending one another. I get more joy out of building one particular way and building one another. But that's fine for me. But do bear in mind that, you know, if you're looking at two-handing it yourself as a solo player, the game is fully cooperative, so you could solo it as a 4-player game if you wanted to. I mean, wow, you know, if you can do that, you have the mental capacity to do that, wow, I'm seriously impressed with you, and I'd love to see somebody do a 4-player solo of this. It will not be me, but if you can handle that, I would suggest that you go pretty much like I do in Too Many Bones, that you go for 2 characters, because I feel like you're getting more out of the game than that. The game is obviously designed as a fully co-op game with solo there. Solo works, absolutely nothing wrong with the solo, but I prefer it at 2 characters. So do bear that in mind if you are a solo gamer. So all of those things. So when we look at that, yeah, and we look at some of the extraneous stuff, you know, when we look at the production quality, which is obviously first rate and absolutely fantastic. When we look at the quality of the rule books and the fact that, you know, you could read that and it's got almost every answer in there for you, then that's great. None of those are actually, they're factors in me ranking this game so highly, but they're not the key factor. And the key factor for me is everything else. We're talking about the character builds. We're talking about the amount of variability. We're talking about the gameplay mechanisms. We're talking about that experience. We're talking about a campaign I can do in 3 sittings rather than 300 sittings. When I put all that together, and we're also talking about the DNA of one of my favourite games, which was obviously Too Many Bones. When I put all that together and I get this wonderful, wonderful product at the end of it, which is a game that absolutely starts to make perfect sense for me as a gamer, which is a game that really, really, just as I mentioned earlier, hits the nail on the head almost every time for me. Few minor quibbles aside, you know, kind of not some stuff not being expressed enough, the fact that your end fights could start to get a bit samey if you play it a lot, but that's all easily rectifiable. When I put all that together, I've got a game here that I've, in the couple of months I've had it, invested 50 to 60 hours in. And probably by the end of the year, I will invest another 50 to 60 more in. I can't wait to share this experience with other people. I can't wait to have a rainy Sunday afternoon where I can set it up and play it on myself again. The narrative is strong enough to carry it through in a way that it's potentially not in Too Many Bones. And that makes a big difference for me, and that's why it leapfrogged Too Many Bones. The fact I can set it up fairly quickly and put it away fairly quickly, and I can save in between sessions, is also a massive plus for me. The key element is how much fun I'm having with this game. And I can't think of any game recently that I've played that I've had as much fun with that when I put it away, I want to get it straight back out again and I want to play it again. I'm constantly thinking about when I can next play the game. Now, my copy, this pre-production copy, it's flitting between myself and Mike Dennis from Ready Steady Play, who lives about 15 minutes away from me, because, you know, we're doing this playthrough on his channel. So I sometimes have to go a couple of weeks without having access to Elder Scrolls. And yeah, it feels like for me that other games pale into significance in a certain way. Now, it's not going to be a game for everybody. Your mileage is definitely going to vary. You know, it may not do enough of one thing, or may not do enough of another thing, or it might be too deep or not deep enough for you, or maybe it's not Euro enough for you. These are all obviously purely subjective. It's not for me to say that this is your favourite game of all time. But what I can safely say is that this is currently my #1 favourite game of all time, from a solo perspective and from a 2-player perspective as well. You know, I only played one 3-player game, and I don't play many 3-player games, but from a solo and a 2-player perspective, when you're looking at co-op games, this is my favourite game of all time. I'm hoping it gets delivered to backers this year. If it is, it will, without a shadow of a doubt, be my #1 game of 2024. If it slips into next year, it's going to take something huge to knock it off next year. I'm not saying it can't happen, but we are now on kind of middle of October now, so I can't see anything else coming out this year which is going to kind of knock this off the #1 spot for 2024, and currently knock it off my favourite game of all time. I really think that what Chip Theory done here is taken the concept of Too Many Bones, taken the license of Elder Scrolls, taken, more importantly, their time with honing and fine-tuning every aspect of it to mesh together to give you this complete experience. It's got its quibbles, it's got its foibles, like all games. It's not perfect, and it certainly won't be for everybody. Certainly when we talk about the cost, certainly when we talk about the investment in time you've got to make for it, certainly when we talk about the kind of sandboxy nature and the more adaptability and variability that you can get in your characters, maybe you really enjoy the kind of more structured way of Too Many Bones characters, that you're just, you know the characters and you're building up and making them slightly different each time. Here, you're making a brand new character from scratch. Maybe that's not for you, but for me, it is. I love Too Many Bones. I love Too Many Bones. It's never leaving my collection. I prefer Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era because it takes everything that made Too Many Bones great and expands on it and improves on it and makes it, for me personally, a better experience. So for those reasons, Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era is my favourite game of all time currently. And there we go. That's my thoughts on Elder Scroll Betrayal of the Second Era from Chip Theory Games. You know, I say I've not made this video because for a month or so, because I was really weighing things up in my mind. It's a really bold statement to say, and it's obviously purely personal and purely for me. But I'm pretty certain now, given the 50, 60 hours play that I put into it, that I don't enjoy any more game as much as I enjoy this. And please feel free to kind of not debate, but tell me why it's not for you. And I understand that, you know, if it's not for you, it's not for you. That's okay. I'm saying from my perspective, I think it's fantastic. I can't wait to get my pledge in now, which will obviously, I've backed it all and gone all in on everything, etc. So I can't wait to get my pledge in now. But for me, my favourite game of all time, which was Kingdom Death Monster, has been roundly usurped by Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era from Chip Theory, ZeniMax and Bethesda. So thank you very much for watching me on this video. I've laid myself bare a little bit there. I've put my heart on my sleeve and I'm really just saying, yeah, this is my favourite game. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out our other videos. And one final thought, if you can't find anyone else to play with, then there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Until next time, bye-bye.